Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. I'm going to give people an opportunity to join. So glad the chat's working. Good morning. Happy New Year to everybody. Okay, welcome to the Kentucky Harm Reduction and Recovery Community of Practice webinar series presented by Voices of Hope and the University of Kentucky Harm Reduction Hub. My name is Brooke West. I am a person in recovery and the Training and Education Manager at Voices of Hope in Lexington, Kentucky. The goal of a community of practice is to bring together a group to engage in training, share best practices, and network around a common interest. Today, the topic of our community of practice is holistic wellness for recovery and harm reduction, presented by a great group of experts from the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Office. We will also hear from Casey Bitchek, Community Research Associate, who is providing an update from the University of Kentucky Harm Reduction Hub. But first, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you are a peer support specialist interested in continuing education credit for this webinar, you need to complete the survey that we will place in the chat toward the end of the session. And as most of you have discovered, we have the chat feature on so you can participate during the webinar and ask questions. So now I'll introduce you to Casey, a harm reductionist with over a decade of experience working in syringe service programs, advocacy organizations, and community-driven research studies. Casey has held direct service roles at syringe service programs in New York, and Louisville, Kentucky, and has provided training and technical assistance on working with people who use drugs and/or trade sex to harm reduction programs and health departments across the country. Casey came to harm reduction work through lived experience of substance use and a desire to keep herself and her community as safe as possible. As Community Research Associate at the Harm Reduction Hub, Casey will provide monthly updates on the Hub syringe residue testing project on this webinar, as well as harm reduction education about emerging adulterants in the drug supply. Welcome, Casey. Welcome back, Casey. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brooke. Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. Let me get my screen shared. And then let me get into presenting mode. Okay. Hi. So great to be back here with everyone. I am here today with an update on syringe testing results from November. So here's our quick agenda. We're going to have an overview of what the hub is, just in case anyone on the webinar is new to the Harm Reduction Hub. Then we'll talk about November syringe testing results. Then we'll talk about some 6-month trends, and then we'll get into next steps. And sorry, my cat just jumped onto my lap. So if you see a little set of ears, sorry. Okay, so first of all, what's the Harm Reduction Hub? The Hub is an initiative that brings together academic and community-based scientists and harm reductionists with the goal of providing early insights into Kentucky's street drug supply, which we do by analyzing residue in used syringes. We are a service first and foremost. It is very important to us that we remain a service for the programs that we serve and the people that they serve for people who use drugs and the people who are working with people who use drugs throughout Kentucky. And so part of that is that two-way feedback loops are with our partners are critical to the hub's success. So we're constantly receiving feedback from the sites that we partner with, as well as our steering committee, which is made up of researchers, doctors, scientists, and lots of people with lived experience. All right, so I'll get into the November testing results. So just as a reminder, or just to let anyone who wasn't here in the December webinar know, we have started to present results from 2 months back because it takes us some time to get final results collated, and we wanted to be sure we were presenting you with the final results. So that's why you're hearing November results now instead of December. You'll hear December results on February 3rd, which is when the next webinar is. And we'll also give an overview of all of our 2025 data in that webinar. So please join us in February for that. All right, so we'll get into November testing results. So this is the top 10 most frequently substances across all sites. So we have sites currently we tested in November from sites in Jefferson, Fayette, and Perry counties. From those sites, 550 syringes had substances identified in them, with fentanyl, diphenhydramine, which is the active ingredient in Benadryl, and methamphetamine being the three most identified substances across all three of those counties. And then just something else to note, from this chart looks very similar to the top 10 substances for October, but something else to note is that xylazine is not in the top 10 substances. It was in October, and medetomidine with about 15% has moved into the top 10 substances. So just something for you to know. And I have a hard time seeing the chat when I'm presenting, so if there are questions, please feel free to just, and one of the other co-hosts can just, Brooke can just let me know, or Amanda. And then I know that there are some Hub staff who are on this webinar who may be answering questions in chats too. So thank you.
There's no questions yet, Casey. You're good.
Okay, great. All right, so getting into county-specific breakdowns. So in November, substances were present in 102 syringes tested from Fayette County, with diphenhydramine and fentanyl being the top two substances. And something very interesting to note about Fayette specifically in November versus October is that we've seen a pretty drastic decrease in frequency of cocaine identified in syringes. So in October, it was the second most commonly identified substances in syringes that test positive, with 72% of syringes having cocaine in them. It's still in the top 10 for Fayette County this in November, but it is the 10th most common substance, and only about, or not only, but about 20% of syringes had cocaine versus that 72% number the month prior. And then for Jefferson County, substances were present in 369 syringes tested from Jefferson County. And we saw an increase in medetomidine frequency from October to November of 2025. So in October, it was in about 18% of the syringes that were tested, and in November, we saw it in about 22%. So an increase, just something to be aware of. Also, something that you'll see when we get into the 6-month trends is medetomidine actually decreased overall. So just interesting to note that it increased in Jefferson County and not the other counties. And then for Perry County, substances were present in 79 syringes tested from Perry County. All 79 tested positive for methamphetamine. And then about half tested positive for dimethylsulfone, which is a bulking agent often added to methamphetamine. And then lidocaine, diphenhydramine, D-mannitol, which is a sugar, and caffeine were all identified in one syringe apiece. All right. Any questions before I get into the 6-month trends? I'll try to get the chat up.
No questions yet. Amanda did provide the link to sign up for the
Awesome.
Harm Reduction Hub email alerts and newsletters.
Perfect. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so I'll get into our 6-month trends. So we've broken them out by adulterants or additives that we're seeing commonly, and then substances that we assume people are choosing to use. So xylazine, medetomidine, and BTMPS. So you can see the 6-month trend. We saw a very big increase in xylazine in October, and then it dropped down in November overall. And as I said, we saw a slight decrease in medetomidines presence from October to November. So again, very interesting to note that it was increased in Jefferson County and presumably decreased in the other counties, its presence. And then BTMPS, we also saw a slight decrease. And just for folks who aren't aware of what these are, sorry, I should have started with this. Xylazine and medetomidine are both veterinary tranquilizers that we're seeing added to the drug supply, primarily to fentanyl. They both, as I said, they're both veterinary tranquilizers, so they both have a sedative effect, but they both have pretty xylazine's. Xylazine is associated with skin wounds that very quickly become necrotic if they are left untreated, and medetomidine is associated with very severe withdrawal symptoms that often require hospitalization. And if you have any further questions about any of that, we would love to answer them. You can email us at ukharmreductionhub@uky.edu. You also can subscribe to our newsletter, which often has information, harm reduction tips about these additives. And then BTMPS is a plasticizer. So it's used in the production of plastics to protect them from UV rays. There's not a lot of research currently on how it impacts humans, but in animals, it has been shown to have negative health consequences. So we're highlighting it, keeping an eye on it. Any questions about any of these before I move on?
Nothing in the chat.
All right, great. Okay, and then 6-month trends in fentanyl, meth, and cocaine. So we saw a decrease in meth between October and November. Fentanyl we saw a slight decrease, but remained relatively steady, its presence in the syringes that were tested positive for any substances. And we saw a decrease in cocaine, which correlates with that decrease that we saw in Fayette County from October to November. Any questions about any of this? Great.
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, cool. Well, then I can just jump right into next steps. It's a shorter presentation this month. So please join us next month on the 3rd, or on, wow, I put the 2nd, but it is the 3rd. Please join us next month on the 3rd for the overview of the December testing results and a complete overview of the 2025 testing syringe residue testing data. And then sign up for our newsletter and alerts by scanning this QR code. I haven't gotten it yet, but I am going to set up this week a way so that you can sign up for just newsletters, just alerts, all of the above. So be on the lookout for that as well in the next newsletter or alert. There should be a way to subscribe or unsubscribe from things that you are not wanting and resubscribe to things that you are. And then again, you can email us at ukharmreductionhub@uky.edu for any questions, comments, concerns. We welcome all of that. As I said earlier, feedback is essential to our process, so we always welcome feedback from our community and are happy to answer any questions. And yeah, thank you for your time today, and I am looking forward to hearing the rest of the webinar.
Thanks, Casey. It looks like a question did come through
Oh,
in the
great.
chat. To what do you attribute the significant decrease in cocaine presence in syringes in Fayette County?
That is a great question. And I will be honest and say I don't have a great answer. I know that, Amanda, do you want to jump in at all, or Kelly, or anyone else? Sorry, I'm not trying to.
Sure. So, I mean, generally speaking, we're testing like, let's say 100 or 200 from each site. So it would be important for us to see if this is a trend or it's decreasing overall in subsequent months, or this could have just been a one-off because of all the syringes, of course, that we're only testing a small portion. So we just can't really make too much out of just a 1 month decrease.
Also, wasn't October the first time, one of the first or second month that we tested many syringes from Fayette County?
Yes, we don't have as long of trend data in Fayette as we do in Jefferson.
Yeah, so October could have been an outlier, November could have been the outlier. We'll have more information as we continue to test. But really good question. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Casey. And thank you to your cat again for making a brief appearance. And the Harm Reduction Hub would also like to thank Vital Strategies for their support of this work. These updates are so important. Now I will introduce the experts from the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Office who will present on holistic wellness for recovery and harm reduction. We've got Dr. Nicole Huff, an assistant professor and extension specialist for family finance and resource management at the University of Kentucky. Dr. Huff's work focuses on improving the financial and mental well-being of individuals and families across the lifespan with applied research designed to educate, equip, and strengthen human relationships. Dr. Heather Norman Bergdorf received her doctorate degree in nutritional sciences within the University of Kentucky College of Medicine. Dr. Dr. Norman Bergdorf is an associate extension professor in the Department of Dietetics and Human Nutrition at the University of Kentucky, specializing in nutrition education, public health, and community engagement. Catherine Jury is a senior extension specialist for family health at the University of Kentucky, where she provides evidence-based resources that empower Kentuckians to make healthy choices and improve their quality of life. Catherine's professional experience includes early childhood education, adult education in family and consumer sciences, and public health. She is a nationally ranked mental health first aid instructor and coordinator. And just as a side note, she did her mental health first aid training for Voices of Hope staff last year, and it was magnificent. And Dr. Alex Elswick is a tireless advocate for people with substance use disorders. He currently serves the University of Kentucky as an assistant professor and extension specialist for substance use prevention and recovery. Alex is a trained researcher, recovery coach, and mental health therapist, as well as a co-founder of Voices of Hope, a peer-driven recovery community organization. But most importantly, Alex is himself a person in long-term recovery from the chronic disease of addiction. I'm so happy to have you all here, and I will turn it over to you, Alex.
Thank you so much. I'm going to get slides pulled up and we'll get started. All right. Good morning, everybody. Let me start by saying, I'm always proud and grateful to share that I'm a person in recovery. I'm always proud and really grateful to share that I'm a co-founder of Voices. And I tell people frequently that I get credit for things that the Voices organization and the people within it do, and I get credit that I don't deserve. And the Harm Reduction Hub is an example because and Amanda, you don't know this, but I've had people compliment me on the Harm Reduction Hub, and I want to make it abundantly clear that I've had nothing to do with the creation of this thing, and it's brilliant and it's incredible. And I've so enjoyed coming to this community of practice to learn about harm reduction in novel ways, in creative ways, in interesting ways, non-traditional ways. And I think it's the coolest. And so I'm really glad to be here as a presenter today. I also want to say thank you so I know this is really Amanda's brainchild. So thank you, Amanda. I love you for that. But I think Amanda wouldn't be so mad if I told you that Brooke is always the actual hands and feet. Brooke is the organizer. She's the one who got us to start the webinar on time. She's the one who gets it done. So thank you all for your work, making it easy on us. And I'm particularly excited this morning because this is one of those days when my worlds collide. I kind of have a dual role that I get to work at Voices and work at the university, and every once in a while they collide together. And that's what's happening today. So I'm so excited to bring to you some of my brilliant colleagues who are experts in different aspects of holistic human health and wellness. And for them to describe some of the ways that bears really importantly on harm reduction and recovery. One more disclaimer before I jump in. You all won't be able to tell this because my colleagues are so brilliant and they'll have these nice refined slides and everything, but they were forced to cram because despite their best efforts, I didn't get us prepared and this is the Tuesday right after the break. And so I just want you all to know that they were forced to do a bunch of work last minute and they didn't complain a bit because they're awesome colleagues. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, you've already been introduced to our presenters, so I can skip that step and I can launch into introducing the topic for the day. And if any of you all have joined me for any of my presentations in the past, you know I like to share personal experience. Well, don't panic because I'm not going to do it today. Sometimes I get self-conscious that people get tired of hearing my own experience. And so I wanted to start today by sharing experience of one of my friends. This is a picture of one of the very best days of my life. This is my wedding day. This is my best man and also my best friend. His name's Bobby. And I saw Clint Underwood is on the call, and I know Clint knows Bobby. We played baseball together way back in the day. Bobby and I grew up in the same neighborhood. He loves to tell the story that the first time he came over to play, my mom made him Nesquik chocolate milk, and that's the glue, the adhesive that kept us together. I can remember leaving at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning with Bob and a tennis ball and going out into the neighborhood, and you know, we wouldn't come back until 8 o'clock at night. And he could make up games, he could make up entire worlds with just a tennis ball. It was just special. Bob just spent his second Christmas at Big Sandy Correctional Complex. He is serving a sentence on a drug trafficking charge. And because I care about him so much, because of just the role that he plays in my life, I can't help but stop and think about him all the time when I'm doing this work. And I was thinking about this picture, and I was thinking that a lot of people might look at this picture and say, "Hey, there's a picture of a professor and a prisoner." And I certainly wouldn't say it that way. I think some would. And I think it would be easy to look at this and ask the question. You ask the question, what's the difference between us? How come I get to be professor and I get to be leading the webinar today? And how come Bobby's eating another Christmas dinner incarcerated? And when you ask a lot of the world, when I asked a lot of the experts in the treatment space or in the substance use disorder space, they told me things like, I must have been more honest and more open-minded and more willing, or I must have wanted it more, or I had more willingness, or Bob's just not willing to go to treatment. Bob's been to treatment something like 20 times, right? Inpatient treatments, outpatient treatments, intensive outpatient treatments. It's not a lack of willingness. It's not a lack of desire. And so when you're just looking at it from that perspective, that kind of narrow perspective, it's really hard to figure out. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful, right? How can it be? But when you zoom out and when you take a broader lens, it's really nerdy, but when I teach about theory in class, I tell my students that theories are like lenses. And when you use a different theory, it gives you a different lens, a totally new way of seeing something. When you zoom out from Bob's story and you think about his experience in terms of social determinants, in terms of the broader factors that shaped his life, it becomes a whole lot more clear really fast. So I'm going to run down this list pretty quickly, but Bob's been unemployed most of his life. Because he's been unemployed, he's had limited opportunity to make income, which means he's not able to handle his expenses, which means he has growing debt and medical bills. He has limited support from his family. He does have a house, which is paid for. He has a vehicle, but he's not able to continue to pay for the car insurance, so he's driving illegally most of the time. He reads at about a fifth grade level. He has multiple learning disabilities that have never been diagnosed and that have never been treated. And as a consequence, he's one of those kids that got completely left behind by the system. Bob eats like garbage all day long, processed foods. No one's ever taught him any different. He has really limited social support system, really few reciprocal obligations, and an appallingly awful physical health profile. And when you zoom out from that perspective, it's not hard at all to understand why Bob is struggling and I'm not. And one of the things one of the points that I want to make that I think is hard to make graphically is that when we talk about these holistic factors, these holistic resources, it's not just an itemized list. Like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 because they're all interconnected. So the fact that Bob has limited employment opportunities impacts every other item on this list, right? And in that way, every one of these consequences becomes a Christmas tree, which leads to 3 more negative consequences and 6 more and 8 more. And so this has been a really helpful frame for me to look at the folks in my life, the people that I care about, and to try to say, what are the things that he needs? Does he need to be forced into another abstinence-based treatment center? And then on the other side, have all of his social determinants of health ignored? Probably not. Probably these massive gaps in his health and well-being are places that we can start, right? Maybe this is a clue. So I wanted to start by asking you all a question. When you think about these holistic aspects of harm reduction, of recovery, what are some of the things that we tend to overlook or neglect, or things that we sort of have this attitude like they're not that important? And as you all are kind of offering some of those answers, I'll just tell you that for me, I was told that things like physical activity, things like nutrition, even things like mental health were an afterthought. That what I needed to do is I need to go get sober and then I can worry about all these other aspects of my life. And it's to my great surprise, I suppose, that all of those things aren't supplements. They're not ancillary. They're not afterthoughts. They're the very things that drive harm reduction, the very things that drive recovery. And so some of the things that housing is one of the very first things that I saw in here. I can't imagine a more important intervention than housing. And it's one that we overlook every single day. Where's Bob going to live when he gets out of treatment or when he gets out of prison? Routine, scheduling, planning, having an order and some structure to your life, family support, health, trauma, multiple people saying trauma, emotional intelligence. I mean, look at these. And so here's the point. We get transportation, health, diet, trauma, education, childcare. We could go down. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface, right? We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of all of the holistic factors that are going to bear really importantly on someone's ability to recover. And yet, again and again, so much of what we keep hearing from the field is, well, they just need to go to treatment. They just need to get sober, right? So I'm going to take a step back for just a moment out of talking about holistic health because I want to describe what extension is for the folks on the call who aren't familiar. This is our shameless plug. We love to describe the tripartite mission, which is this really obnoxiously fancy way of saying three-part mission. So every land-grant university, like the University of Kentucky, has a three-part mission, a three-leg stool. Education, which is like when you go to the classroom and you learn and you get a degree. Research, which is all these brilliant researchers in the Harm Reduction Hub who do research and publish it in academic journals. And then there's a third leg that's called extension that unfortunately people tend to be less familiar with. And the idea behind extension is that not everyone, including my friend Bob, not everyone has been fortunate enough to come to the university to get an education. But there's no doubt that all of the knowledge and information that we generate at the university could be useful to every Kentuckian. And so what we do is we extend the knowledge across the state. We teach and program outside of classrooms, outside of the university, all across the state. We have county offices and agents who operate in all 120 counties, including the most remote and rural counties in Kentucky. And then we have state level specialists who you're meeting today. My colleagues here who are experts in their respective fields, and they create programs that we can disseminate through these county offices. In many ways, extension is the hands and feet of the university. That's what we like to say. And that sounds like a goofy cliche, but it's absolutely true. One of the biggest criticisms and indictments of just the academic world is that we live up in an ivory tower and that we publish our research and that we never come down to the real world where it matters. And that's what extension is. We're the hands and feet of the university. If I can just mix every metaphor on the planet, where the rubber meets the road, we're the ones that actually engage with communities to make a difference. And last slide, I'm going to give you on extension. I don't want to lose your interest by boring you with extension, but it's important to understand who we are and how we operate. So I've said here that we're embedded and not episodic, and that relates to harm reduction in some really important ways. What that means is our county agents don't just come in and show up for 6 weeks to run a program. They live in that community. They go to church in that community. They go to the grocery in that community. It means if they show up for 6 weeks and they do a really bad program, they're going to have to hear about it for the rest of their lives, right? They're meaningfully connected in these communities. So just like harm reduction, which and peer-based services, which instead of coming alongside somebody for 30 days and then leaving them to the wolves, it's really positioned for long-term engagement, prolonged engagement. And then my very favorite thing about extension is that it's pragmatic. That the whole purpose of what we do is to be practical, is to take the kind of impractical parts of the research we do at the university and to try to make it useful to people like you and I. And for all those reasons, it makes an extension an ideal partner. And the very last thing I'll say about extension at this point is, in our recovery coach training at Voices, we talk about peers being having this egalitarian relationship, right? That you're on equal footing with the people that we serve. That's what makes the peer relationship so unique, that you're not an expert who's having this top-down relationship where you're telling people what they need to do. Instead, you're coming alongside people and you're helping people. And our agents are so much the same because they're a jack of all trades and because they have to do so many different kinds of programming in their counties. They're not experts. They're really just there to be facilitators and helpers. And in that way, cooperative extension is perfectly positioned to do harm reduction work. And so this is our health equity framework and extension, the way that we think about trying to change health outcomes in Kentucky. And what you'll recognize there are those social determinants of health that you've probably seen before working in this field. All of those holistic aspects of health that we're saying, hey, extension may not be substance use experts. We may not be harm reduction experts. We may not be recovery experts, but we're nutrition experts and we're family finance experts. And so what we're going to do is bring that to bear on the people who can use it. So, just out of curiosity, how many of you all are familiar with cooperative extension at all? In what way were you familiar with extension? I'm going to assume that a few of you had some 4-H experience, maybe.
Alex, we actually already have some compliments of some specific extension offices in the chat.
That is the greatest. Tristy said the Letcher County Extension Office is wonderful to work with and be involved in. Thank you so much for saying that. And in addition to kind of giving you this conceptual webinar about why holistic wellness is so important, one of the other things that I hoped would come out of this is that you all would see what a partner extension could be and what an opportunity it could be to enhance the work that you all do. I saw Evan said he knew very little about extension, and Evan, don't feel the slightest bit embarrassed about that. I go on our university campus every single day and meet people who don't know what extension is. So glad for this opportunity. Whatever county you're in, know that there's a county office and multiple agents in that county who want to come and do this work, who want to come and partner to build holistic health and wellness for your communities. Brandy was a horse and goat club leader in high school. And so I smile because what traditionally extension comes from an agriculture-based background. And so most people, if they're familiar with extension, they affiliate it with either 4-H or ag and natural resources. And that's still an important part of what extension does. But to my great delight, extension has evolved with the times. And we've recognized that this is really that we're positioned to have an impact with these different things. So that's awesome. I'm glad for your all's experience, and please reach out to us and get connected if we can partner with you. Built raised beds at Spiro Health in Knox County. Yes, we do recovery gardening. I mean, so many different kinds of interventions. You can't even believe. They're really creative and novel. So yeah, thank you all for entertaining me on that. Just a couple more slides. I don't want to hit you over the head with all of these. I mean, I guess I am sort of hitting you over the head with all of these graphics and kind of conceptual things. But many of you all have heard me say this before. But when I got to graduate school, I didn't learn first about social determinants of health. What I learned about first was recovery capital. And the first time that I read about recovery capital, light bulbs went off in my head. I thought about my friend Bob, and I realized, this is what we're talking about. This is what's been missing so much from the field. This is the thing that drove my recovery. It wasn't not using drugs. It wasn't reducing my drug use. It was all of these things that improved my health and wellness in such a way that I had a life worth living, a life worth protecting, that kind of thing. And when I got to cooperative extension, the very first thing that I noticed is that is exactly what they do. I've spent probably 5 years trying to help all of the folks in extension see it, but it's not like I had to bring anything new to extension. We already are experts in work and life skill development, in building leadership capacity, in nutrition, finance, health and well-being. And so, anyways, this is my long-winded way of saying what extension does is holistic health. What extension does is harm reduction. What extension does is build recovery capital. And so last question before I pass it off to my colleagues to kind of dive into the specific domains of holistic health and wellness. I wonder what aspects of holistic health and wellness were surprisingly important to your recovery. So we already covered a big list, but in particular, I'm curious about the things that were surprising to you. And I'll give you my example as you kind of populate that in the chat. For me, it was exercise. And I was just thinking about this morning as I was prepping. When I was at the Salvation Army, I got into some trouble, as we do, broke a rule, non-compliant, right? And I had to spend 6 weeks on restriction. So the first 6 weeks that I was at the Salvation Army, I wasn't allowed to go out and exercise. I wasn't allowed to go to outside meetings, all those kind of things. And I was told during that time that part of the reason for that is because I was using exercise as a substitute and that it wasn't healthy. And I can tell you today, looking back 12 years in recovery, that exercise, just any kind of movement, has been one of the most critical aspects of my recovery. It's not about the way you look, it's about the way that I feel, and not just the way that I feel in my body, but the way that I feel in my mind. I love it for the way that it helps me regulate anxiety. I love it for the way that it helps me regulate my social anxiety. It's been a factor that I think a lot of people would say, yeah, I guess once you get sober, you can start exercising again. And I see it very differently. I see it as a really critical aspect of my holistic health and wellness. So we'll see what we see. Oh, cool. This is cool. Taking care of my body. Absolutely. And I like the way you said that, April, because for me, it's also led, it's probably because I hang out with Dr. Norman Bergdorf so much, but it's also led to thinking a lot more about nutrition. And again, not nutrition so that you can look good, but nutrition so that you can feel good, so that your blood sugar isn't spiking all day long, and so that your energy levels aren't peaking and troughing. And Brooke said artwork. I mean, absolutely. Paint a lot of rocks early in recovery. Eating well and exercise, meditation. Meditation is one that I tell people all the time. I had 3 dozen therapists recommend it to me, and I rolled my eyes over and over again. And I always told people I'm not going to own my way to happiness. And I was wrong, because it turned out meditation is a really important part of my recovery. So, yeah, thank you all so much. I think part of what I'm just trying to underscore is, man, this really transcends drugs and drug use. That recovery really comes down to a kind of health and wellness. And so, anyways, I've already taken too much time. I'm going to pass it off now. Heather, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. I'm so excited to be here. I love how engaged this audience is with the chat. It's pretty incredible. Alex did an incredible job of setting the stage for us to just think outside of maybe traditionally what people share as being, essential for recovery and success in that way. So I think for us, the next 3 presenters, myself, Nicole, and Catherine, kind of what we just want to do is give you a snapshot of not only what Extension can offer potentially at that local level when we think about harm reduction in a creative way, but also kind of just give you a little bit of knowledge so that you maybe feel equipped to go out and have conversations with others if you're building local partnerships or connections, or to think differently about how you approach harm reduction moving forward. So I also have a question here on the slide, because I do want to take a few minutes to kind of have a mini nutrition lesson, and just ask, to you, in what ways are nutrition, food security, and substance use connected? And Alex kind of answered this briefly just a minute ago in sharing his own experiences for holistic health. And I've seen some in the chat already, but do you see that there's a connection? Maybe there isn't to you. Maybe you've never thought of that before. I do believe that there's momentum, and nutrition within recovery spaces is gaining traction. This idea of how important it is, not only physically feeling well, feeling good, but also mentally, the connections between nutrition and brain health and mental health and those types of things. So I want to make the case today, essentially, that nutrition is just as important for substance use recovery as you would think of any other diet sensitive chronic condition, whether that's high blood pressure or diabetes, whatever it is. So within the next maybe 5-7 minutes, I'm hoping you kind of take that away. All right, so Alex, let's jump in. We're going to kind of look at this as nutrition and substance use being a bi-directional relationship. So I'm going to scratch the surface real quick. We could literally talk for 60 minutes about this slide alone. But when we think about bi-directional, they're impacting each other in different ways. So first of all, we understand that substance use is going to negatively impact nutritional status. And so that, there's a lot of documented literature out there. And when I'm right now, I'm kind of talking about this in a really generic form, but we also know that it's largely dependent on the type of substances that are used. So there's lots of literature about alcohol use disorder and how that impacts liver health and those types of things. And so there's a lot of factors that this is going to be dependent on: the type or types of substances used, the frequency of use, the duration, And then we also have to consider that that person may have pre-existing or coexisting health conditions that are also either, maybe impacted by nutrition, or nutrition is impacting as well. What is the common thread, no matter the substance use, is malnutrition. It is incredibly common not only during substance use, but also especially during the recovery phase, even to the point where we see sometimes that early recovery window can exacerbate any malnourished status that an individual might have, especially malnutrition or dehydration. And so we just got to keep all of these different factors in mind. You think about malnutrition, a lot of people tend to kind of have that stereotypical mindset for what malnutrition is. If you think of maybe a third world country, and we see this even in our students in our own classes here at UK and in dietetics and human nutrition. But really, malnutrition can mean a number of different things. It could be a deficiency, it could be an excess of a nutrient that maybe isn't a good thing, it could be an imbalance or impaired tolerance of some of these nutrients that we have to have for our body to work well. Really, the concept is we are not meeting the recommendation, which ultimately manifests as a poor health outcome over time. And there's a number of factors that can also contribute to this. So this is why it's so messy and complicated. On the bottom of the slide, these are just some of the high level frequent contributors we tend to see when it comes to malnutrition for someone who is using substances or is in recovery. There could be physical body damage where there's impaired absorption. So it could be that an individual actually is eating foods that are abundant in nutrients, but the GI tract is damaged. And so we've lost the ability to efficiently absorb those nutrients, or it's harder for the body to actually retain them or metabolize or use those nutrients. Very common is irregular or non-existent eating patterns. It could be due to lack of food access or nutrition security, food insecurity, where they just don't have ready access to nutritious foods over time. Or it could be that the substance itself is impacting the hormones that regulate appetite, so they no longer are hungry. And we know with women, this is a major reason why they may choose to start using substances, is because it will suppress their appetite with the goal of weight loss or weight management. Food and or housing insecurity. Housing was mentioned so many times. That directly ties to food nutrition, because you have to have a kitchen. You have to have a space to be able to prepare food, right? Not even just a kitchen, but you have to have resources and tools in your kitchen to be able to prepare nutritious foods. That dysregulated hormonal signaling can be lost over time, and in some cases can be restored. There are changes in dietary preferences. So we even know that individuals that use certain substances, they're going to prefer highly sweetened foods that are less nutritiously dense, or low fiber foods. So those dietary preferences are going to change. And then poor oral health and tooth decay. If it's hard to eat, if it hurts to eat, you're probably not going to, or you're going to be looking for foods that are less nutritious. Okay, Alex, next. Now, that seems all gloom and doom. But what we know is that nutritious foods and reliable food access does support physical and mental health during and after substance use. So essentially, we want to think about restoration and healing. So we're providing your body the energy that it needs. We're replacing the essential nutrients that your body needs to be able to support the natural healing processes that are going to be taking place during the recovery period. And that can be broadly interpreted. The healing process itself could be, restoration of hormonal signaling, or it could truly be allowing the gut to heal so that you have the physiological structure that allows you to better absorb nutrients. It could be that you're going to support the immune system and allow it to actually do its job. It's going to stabilize mood. There's growing literature that shows how important essential fatty acids are to stabilizing our mood. So there's definitely a connection between even what we're eating and how we're feeling. We're going to reduce and start to regulate some of those cravings. We're going to, if we can think about establishing balanced dietary patterns where it's not you're either going without food or you're binging with one large meal during the day. But if we can think about how we can create practice and routine and structure throughout the day with our food nutrition, it's going to truly help And there's even some literature out there that shows if we can educate people in recovery about food and nutrition, that it is linked to improved recovery outcomes in the long term. And then at the bottom of the slide, I just want to highlight these are kind of the buckets of the 5 major essential nutrients that our bodies need to function each day. We could truly do a webinar on each of these, the role of protein in substance use recovery, carbohydrates in substance use recovery. But this is where our nutrition education and the resources that Extension has can come into play, because we can educate on all of these incredibly important things, those micronutrients being vitamins, minerals, the importance of water, hydration, and so on and so forth. So in my last few minutes, Alex, if you want to go on, I'll just highlight what Extension has. And some of you on the call might be familiar with this, or you may have seen Healthy Choices for Your Recovering Body, but didn't know that was Extension in your local community. But we actually have non-stigmatizing nutrition education within UK Cooperative Extension that is truly tailored for an audience that's in substance use recovery. So this was back before COVID. I think it was probably 2019. We were starting to hear from some of our educators, our boots on the ground out at the local extension offices, that they were spending a lot of time in recovery centers, but the general adult nutrition education materials we had just weren't cutting it. It wasn't meeting their needs. It wasn't able to address the specific questions or the concerns that those in recovery had. And so they came to us at the state and said, is there any way we could adapt our existing adult curriculum so that it's more tailored and it truly meets those local needs? And so several of us on campus put our heads together, Alex included, myself, several others, Catherine, and we adapted that curriculum and created Healthy Choices for Your Recovering Body. This is a multi-session program that some folks at the local extension office can provide. And it's really nice because it addresses recovery capital. When you look at the individual, thinking about skills and confidence and resiliency, and it's all tied to food nutrition. So it's going to teach nutrition knowledge on all those essential nutrients we just highlighted: carbs, fats, protein, hydration, vitamins, minerals. It's going to equip people with skills and the ability to practice. So it is incredibly pragmatic of ensuring that they know how to prepare food nutrition. It could be as simple as, some people, we don't make assumptions on what people's skills are for food preparation. It could be as simple as teaching someone how to boil water to make pasta, a whole grain pasta to increase fiber in their diet. Food safety is incredibly important. Yes, you have to refrigerate your leftovers. You can't just leave them in the microwave, and that is a question we get in Extension. And then food resource management. This kind of ties to the financial side too. So how is it that we can budget for our food? We can plan, we can use, we can store efficiently, we can ensure, this is an incredibly powerful tool when we think about parents who want to be reunited with their children so that they have some autonomy about how to provide and feed their family nutritious meals. And so all of the individuals who can provide this curriculum are trained and have received, information that has built their capacity to be able to work with audiences that are in recovery. So this is truly focused on the individual. And Alex, if you go to the next slide, I want to kind of show how we also kind of think about the bubble in which people who are in recovery live. So we want to think about the systems level work that can be done at the community level that's going to make it easier for someone in recovery to be able to, number one, access nutritious food. So really thinking about food insecurity and nutrition security. So that takes a step further. You could have food available, but that food might not necessarily be the most nutritious. So how can we think about nutrition security so that they're getting the nutrients that they need? And so here are some just examples. This is a real picture that we have from one of the recovery gardens. Someone mentioned raised beds at a center. We do have resources for recovery gardens of bringing together kind of our traditional agriculture, our horticulture folks to support local recovery centers, connecting residents maybe from a recovery center to some food access points in the community, or to food assistance programs that might be local. And just thinking about all of the influences, trying to address them, not just putting the onus on the individual to, hey, you need to learn how to prepare food, but no, thinking about how can we support them? How can we maybe potentially address one of those social determinants of health? Because food was a pillar there and access was one of those. So how is it that we can also consider how we impact that as well? So not only do we have nutrition education, but we also think about systems level work. And through that, the ultimate goal is really just to build strength and resilience that's going to help minimize harm and support during recovery. So that's what I have. That's a quick and dirty run. You're more than welcome to reach out to me if you have any specific questions. I'm happy to kind of share or provide any additional information you might need specific to nutrition and substance use recovery. Okay, I'll pass it on to Nicole.
All right. Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Alex, and everyone, Brooke and Amanda. I'm going to switch gears, but not really, because as Alex and Heather, as they began to point out, and Catherine will follow, there is connection between these different life domains and how it impacts harm reduction and recovery. And so I want to start things off with the question, all right, when you think about recovery and substance use disorder and financial challenges, what are some of those biggest financial challenges that come to mind when you think about recovery or substance use disorders? So what have you seen in your experience? What have you experienced? All right, so finding a job with a criminal record, employment is always big. And so thinking back to those social determinants of health, needs and wants, budgeting accordingly, a lack of income, poor credit, credit card debt, debt in general, repairing a credit score, legal fees, restart expenses, restitution fees, legal fees, absolutely. Right. And so not being able to stop working to go to rehab and how to balance that. These are really, really good. Yeah, finding a job, finding employment. So Alex, you can go on to the next one. So, but as these begin to illuminate, childcare costs, yes, it's hard when you consider financial stress, isolating that financial stress from the rest of, our daily lives. And so when a person experiences financial stress, I often hear people say, it feels like I'm drowning. I just don't feel like I can keep my head above water. I'm not even able to tread the water with the weight of the financial stress. Now, when you like compound that financial stress with all of the other areas of your lives that it touches, it's easy to see how someone can feel like they're drowning with that, because finances are very integrally tied to our lives, right? Like we need finances in order to survive, quite literally. And so, financial stress affects our ability to be resilient when overcoming adversity. Recovery from substance use disorder is a challenge that can both it has, and Heather talked about this bidirectional relationship. Well, finances and recovery have a bidirectional relationship as well, where we know that that financial stress can negatively impact someone's mental health, and it can increase a person's likelihood to turn to substances, but also to return to use after recovery if that financial stress cannot be dealt with. And then we know with exposure to prolonged economic hardship can also be detrimental. And so when you look, and so going back to the question that I asked, when you look at what are some of those biggest financial challenges when you're looking at finances and substance use recovery, well, job loss, inadequate housing, lack of transportation. We know that the decisions sometimes that an individual makes while in active use can have long-term negative impacts on their financial health, on their workforce readiness, on their employability. And then it can be a predictor of recurrence. And so, how can, and one of the things that we come back with at Extension and with Alex and I, when we join forces is what can we do to change that narrative? And go on to the next slide, Alex. And so, I love the social determinants of health. And when you look at each of those, if I were to have that graphic on the slide, you can see, and through, just the, very telling example that Alex showed, financial challenges and health and well-being are woven across the social determinants of health. Well, when you look at wellness in particular, there's another model that I like to use. Many of you are probably very familiar with it, but the 8 dimensions of wellness. And also how and so emotional, physical, occupational, intellectual, financial, social, environmental, spiritual, but how all of those different elements work together to contribute to the overall health of an individual. And when we experience strain in any of those one areas, we see ripple effects in the others, right? When we know that with a good systems theory. But the financial dimension plays this pervasive role in a way because it is very linked to our livelihood and our ability to function in society, to gain employment, to afford housing and transportation and food, clothing, childcare, all those different things are all connected. So a little excerpt from SAMHSA's model when it talks about the role of financial health and how pervasive it can be when we're looking particularly at recovery. So when we worry about money, so for example, debt or being able to afford what we need, right? So that's the financial aspect. We sometimes experience anxiety, all right? So that could be, those emotional aspects. We see those physiological manifestations of that worry and that stress. Well, this can lead to medical problems, all right? So this represents that physical domain and trouble at work. So occupational, so the ability to keep work, to show up for work, to gain work, to gain better opportunities. All right, so when this happens, we may even question our own sense of meaning and purpose, right? So that dips into the spiritual domain of well-being, or doubt our competency and capability. So maybe we begin to then doubt our intellectual wellness. So at the same time, when we are not working, again, occupational, we may lose opportunities to interact with others. It's social wellness, may not be able to afford the good food and medical care we all need to stay well, again, contributing to our physical wellness. We may not, we may even need to move our home to a place that feels less safe and secure, and so environmental. And so just to see this cyclical pattern of reciprocity between our actions and reactions and how it impacts our wellness. And we know that really, financial wellness is a key player for all of those. All right, and go to the next slide. But again, not to be doom and gloom, like Heather said. What we do know, though, based on research, is there are things we can do as professionals that promote wellness, that improve those social determinants of health, those dimensions of wellness, and capital is a major part of that. And so I am the family finance specialist with Cooperative Extension, but that's not all of my title. It's family finance and resource management. And to me, the resource management piece is one of the most important with the work that I do at the university, because financial capital is only one form of capital that is vital to our livelihood. There are many other resources that we have to manage that impact our day-to-day lives and resiliency. So resource capital. And so those are the things, the house that we live in, the clothes on our back, the foods that we eat, can we afford medicine and healthcare? And, I'll always think back to the toilet paper shortage of the COVID pandemic, right? But even our ability to provide those basic resources for ourselves. So how do we manage our resources? How do we steward those resources? Human capital is so important. So it again represents our health, our education, our employability, the investments that we make in ourselves. social capital, our networks, the people who are there, who are those 5 people that in an emergency you can call, who will be there. And it may not even be 5, but who is the one? But what are our social networks? Who are the people who can help you gain employment, or who can offer you opportunities, or can be there for your physical, social, emotional needs? Community capital is very important. And so this goes back to the looking at that environmental wellness and in the social determinants of health. Where do we live? What community resources? Organizations like Voices of Hope. Who do we have in our corner, in our communities, that can help support our resiliency, that can provide a buffer against financial stress and stressors in life? And then recovery capital, which is something that Dr. Ellswick talked about at first, and Dr. Norman Bergdorf has talked about, and that what are these things, these combinations of capital that can promote recovery. And so we know that recovery capital spans personal, physical, human, social, community, and everything. And so again, finances is a major part, but it's those other resources that we manage that can be vital. And so when I am doing, and when Cooperative Extension, when we are doing financial literacy education, we do focus on the financial health. Financial health, wellness, and increasing financial literacy is vital, but so are the other elements, because it's those other things that can work together to promote sustained recovery, that can promote resiliency in the face of adversity. It's very important. All right, so next. All right, so, what do we know? So we know, again, and I'm going to play off of Heather's discussion about the bidirectional relationship. So we know that research tells us there's a relationship between financial stress and substance use and return to use. We know that economic instability increases stress and risk behavior. But we also know that financial education supports stability during substance use and recovery, because financial education can help a person better manage their finances, to improve their employability, to improve credit, budgeting, priorities, needs, wants, all of those aspects that some of you mentioned in the chat, to reduce financial stress. And that we also know that Extension in particular, that we emphasize the realistic, survival-oriented strategies to help us manage our finances and to help us manage our resources. And one of the things that research also tells us is that comprehensive solutions to increasing financial literacy, they are missing from public health research. And so existing interventions tend to be siloed, and we are seeing a shift away from that. And the programs and the content areas that we're mentioning today are great exemplars of how we are stepping away from that. But we need more comprehensive approaches that recognize housing, medical care, food access, that there are many, that there are other things that impact our resiliency. Okay. So, with we came back much as the nutrition program that Healthy Choices for Your Recovering Body. When we were discussing, and Alex and I have had conversations, and conversations predated my time at the university, but how can we leverage cooperative extension and this prevention and intervention work that we do to address the overdose epidemic in and beyond Kentucky? And one of the things that Alex and I work together to do is to use financial literacy education to promote recovery capital, by combining substance use prevention and recovery and family finance and resource management. All right. And so I'll highlight a program at the university called Recovering Your Finances. It is a comprehensive financial education and soft skills curriculum for individuals in substance use recovery. It was specifically designed to address in a non-stigmatized way those financial stressors that are often associated with recovery and return to use. Again, with our end goal being to mitigate some of those stressors that increase the likelihood of return to use, like financial stress. And, because we have smaller goals for the individual in the program, but we have larger goals too as we look at how we can, as Extension, work to equip professionals, equip communities and recovery coalitions so that we can create and support a more sustainable workforce, a more employable workforce, both at that individual level, but also in the community, by promoting knowledge and about recovery and addiction and what that means, and so to help reduce the stigma, so that it can improve the employability chances for someone in recovery. And this curriculum, it considers that how to gain employment after addiction, or while in especially early stage recovery, how to budget when you've got things like restitution and court costs built in and whatnot. This is an 8-unit curriculum. And so each unit has a PowerPoint slide deck, facilitator guide, publications. It is objective-based learning. So there are activities and evaluations and marketing tools. And you can go on to the next one. And it is topics are, money management, recognizing those other forms of capital. And so understanding that finances are important, but until they come, because that is not something that happens overnight, it takes time, and it takes for anyone's financial situation to improve, but much less when it is recovering as well. But how to recognize those other forms of capital that can help sustain you while you rebuild your finances. But also budgeting, so prioritization and needs and wants and credit, both establishing credit, restoring credit, reading credit reports, improving credit scores, prioritizing banking, earnings, and savings are some of the fundamental topics that we discuss. Because our goal, when you go to the next slide, I believe this is it. So our goal with Recovering Your Finances is to, move individuals from this basic knowledge and understanding of financial literacy concepts, but move them to implementation and practice. And so not just knowing what a budget is, right? It's income versus expenses, balancing that, but to implementing it. What are some of those, and in this case, those survival strategies that we can do to help someone in recovery recover their finances, so that we are educating them, but we're engaging them during the process so that we equip them in the end to improve their situation. And then Profit is a larger program for professionals that I'll plug that helps train the facilitators on recovering your finances. And so, Profit is a USDA grant that Alex and I have that recognizes the role of financial stress and helps professionals do that so that they are better equipped to help their clients profit in recovery. And so if you are interested at all, and I'll plop the URL back in the chat about how to locate your extension office. But we have somewhere around 75 of our 120 counties. Our county agents are trained to implement the Recovering Your Finances curriculum. We are working on 100%, and we'll continue plugging away at that this year. But if you're interested in learning more to have about recovering your finances, being trained in the program yourself, or partnering with your local extension office to implement Recovering Your Finances, feel free to email our team at profit@uky.edu. And just say, hey, I'm interested. I attended this training. I'm interested in learning more. Let us know what county you're with, and we will also help facilitate that process. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Catherine.
Awesome. I'm so excited to get to be here with you all today. And to reiterate what Nicole has said, if there is one thing that I hope you gain from today, it is a connection to your local extension office. part of my excitement and support for local agents comes from the fact that I was one for several years. But our agents in our local offices truly are phenomenal resources in your community. I saw in the chat earlier a question from Jamie who asked if they could name drop Alex when they reach out to their local extension office. And I say yes. Feel free to name drop Alex. He's popular wherever he goes, so that's a good one to name drop. But also, if there's any, if you would like a personal introduction to specific county staff, in a specific office, I think I saw, Jamie, that you were in the Greenup County, Carter County area. Laura Pullen in the Greenup County office is phenomenal. Whitney Morrow in Carter County is great. We have just phenomenal staff across the state that are truly honored to have the opportunity to partner with other community helpers like you all to help address needs in their community. So my specific area of specialty is family health, so big umbrella, but specifically thinking about the area of physical health today. If you think about yourself, either now or maybe in the past, what are some supports that you have needed to improve your physical health? Feel free to take a second and drop them in the chat. Just what kind of support have you needed, either now or in the past, to improve your physical health? I'm seeing some answers roll in, things from needing connection to providers, to physical needs, environmental needs, healthcare, all of those things. And these are very real needs that we all have. We need access to healthcare. Sometimes we have specific diagnoses, specific conditions, either acute or chronic, that need care and management. Mental health needs as well. And what we know is that everyone has these needs. These are needs that communities, that individuals in communities all need. And we know that people who have a history of drug use have a greater propensity to need as well. So everyone needs them, and some folks need them more than others, or are more likely to need them than others. And so Extension offers a really wide host of resources that help address these needs. And so my goal with my time with you is to talk about what some of these areas of needs that folks have to address physical health, and then resources that Extension has to be able to address them. So one of the biggest barriers to health that we know that people have is health literacy. So understanding what they might need to do to improve their health, what their health problems are, and how to get what they need to make a difference in those situations. And so in Extension, we recognize that. We recognize that there is a gap between what people know about their health and how to change their health, and maybe what level they need to be at to be able to make the wisest choices to actually effectively increase their own personal health and well-being. And so our goal is to provide some resources that help close that gap. So some of the things that we offer are just broad spectrum health education. So classes about things like, what is diabetes? What are questions to ask your physician? What do you need to do to protect your teeth as you age? All these kind of generic health questions are things that Extension can help with. And so we offer in-person classes and programs. All of our in-person classes and programs are designed to be interactive. They're designed to be building applied knowledge. So doing things, doing activities, and engaging in a way that's going to build knowledge that applies to individuals, that they see how it's going to make a difference in their life right now, and building skills. So leaving a program saying, I can do this now. I now have the ability to affect this change in my life. Another resource that we offer on a regular basis, every month we publish 4 health bulletins that provide general health information that are written at a 4th to 6th grade reading level. So the goal is that they are pretty accessible to folks, and they cover a wide range of topics. So we've got an adult health bulletin that covers general health topics for adults. We've got a parenting health bulletin that covers topics that we feel like apply to people who are raising kiddos. We've got a youth bulletin that's specifically geared towards talking with 9 to 12-year-olds about their health, things that they need to know and care about and be prepared for. And then we also have a caregiver health bulletin as well that talks about the needs that folks have when they're caring for others, whether it's aging adults or just others that need that kind of care. Thank you, Heather, for dropping the link to our health bulletins in the chat as well. Again, just addressing that health literacy component to feeling comfortable and confident to even know what a person might need and how to access that information. Another thing that we do is partner to bridge community to clinic care. So Extension loves partnering with healthcare professionals. We know that navigating things like health insurance, finding a provider that meets your needs, finding the kind of care that you need close to you. We know that there's a shortage of many types of providers around Kentucky. So we aim to offer programs that address this issue. We are not healthcare providers, but many of our extension offices do try to do things like offering health clinics, things like vaccine clinics throughout certain times of the year, health fairs where a person might be able to go get their blood pressure checked or their A1C levels checked, and receive a referral if they need additional services. And then also inviting healthcare providers in to help reduce some of that white coat syndrome, or help reduce some of the fear that people may have about interacting with a health professional or receiving care that they may need. So those are all things that local extension offices do and provide. If you are a healthcare provider and you would like to get connected with a local extension office to be on the providing end of those educational services for your community, that would be phenomenal as well. We are always looking for additional community partners and ways that we can be connected to other needed services in all 120 counties. So another domain that is related to physical health is physical activity. And many of you have already shared that being physically active or engaging in exercise has been really meaningful to you as a part of either your recovery journey or just your overall health journey. And we know that that's an important component for a lot of folks. We also know that there can be a lot of barriers to increasing physical activity or to exercise. And so Extension does have a host of resources available. Some Extension offices do offer structured classes or programs. And then our challenges, walking challenges, movement challenges, things like that as well to increase motivation and that social connectivity that is often really meaningful for people. And then we also offer a host of packaged programs that can be adopted by external partners. So if that's something that you're looking for, kind of a packaged physical activity motivational program, please reach out to your local extension office again, or you're welcome to reach out to me and I can help kind of bridge the gap. Those are things that we love to partner with other agencies to be able to provide. Additionally, we offer a host of programs in the domains of mental health and well-being. So sleep education, stress management, other areas that impact physical health that folks may need education on and want to learn about in a supportive environment. We know that that social aspect of learning is really important for people. And so in Extension, something that we aim to do is to couch important education along with that social connection so that folks feel motivated and supported as they are learning new things, new information, and new skills to be able to make that change in their own life. So big picture, those are all things that within Extension that we can provide that help meet those needs of folks on the recovery continuum and that we're excited to do. Alex, is this the time where we ask people for questions or not yet?
I'll jump in here and then we can do a little Q&A. So thank you for that. Yeah, I know we're getting close to time, so just a couple things here to wrap us up. First of all, really across the board, entities are starting to recognize the holistic nature of health and wellness, not just as it relates to substance use. And so I was just thinking another example of that is some hospitals are starting to actually give questionnaires to try to evaluate people's social determinants of health, because we know what an incredible impact that has, and it helps us identify some areas where we can immediately make a difference. And so, we're trying to find ways for Extension to partner with hospitals so that when providers identify the lack of social determinants of health, that then they can help to drive that through Extension. And one other thing that I just wanted to mention as I'm wrapping up here is when I came, this is one of my favorite stories to tell about Catherine Jury. When I came to Extension, this 10 years ago now, so I'm really old, which is horrifying, but there was very little work being done in the substance use prevention and recovery space, really very little. And Catherine was one of the very, very few agents who was already doing that work. She was doing that work before there was a mandate to do it. She was doing that work before it was cool. She was going into detention centers and treatment centers and working with the most vulnerable people, the people that we love, the people who are on this call. And I just always like to mention that, Catherine. You won my respect really, really quickly that way. So it's very cool. Glad to be working with all of you all. And just to kind of put a bow on today, I'll say this. I'll just bring Bob back to the front of your mind because, like so many people who are incarcerated, it can be easy to forget about him sometimes. Bring Bob back to the front of your mind and think about, Bob's going to be up for parole again, I think in December of 26, December of this year. And if Bob is fortunate enough to get paroled this December, is it just going to be a matter of not using drugs that's going to help Bob maintain his life, reduce harm, maintain his recovery? I think it's abundantly clear that that's not the case. It's abundantly clear that there are these massive gaps in his holistic health and well-being that have to be addressed going forward. And so really to summarize, I would just say this. I think if you were to take all of the brilliant presentations that you've seen, not just today, but from all of the folks who come to the Harm Reduction Hub to present, and you put it all together, you would say, wow, harm reduction and substance use and recovery, it's so complex, it's so complicated. Where do you even begin? And I think in my view, the most helpful way to simplify it is to say that stressors increase harm. And so what we're trying to do with harm reduction and recovery is we're trying to manage stressors of every kind. And that's what all of this capital is about. That's what holistic wellness is about. Um, so whether that's focusing on your nutrition or your physical health and wellness or your finances or whatever it is. So let me just say once more, thank you all so much. Thank you again to my co-presenters, even though I put a bunch of pressure on them to generate this all of a sudden. And lastly, I want to say thank you to all of you all for being here. I know that everybody has other things, other demands on their time, but what a meaningful thing it is to me that you all want to show up and that you want to learn and that you want to help people like me. That's at the end of the day, selfishly, that's how I experience this. I feel like 100 people showed up today because they want to help people like me. So that's pretty cool. So thank you so much. And I'll kick it over to Brooke to close us out.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, that was great. Alex and Catherine, Nicole, Heather, the link for the continuing education, the survey that you need to complete to receive the certificate is in the chat. I'll put it in the chat right now because it's currently being buried under all the thank yous and how great that was. So be sure to you all look at the chat and check out your flowers. I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time. And yeah, just thank you for covering all these domains of, wellness, the nutrition, finance, physical, mental health, and just demonstrating that the Extension Office is such a robust and versatile resource. And thank you, Casey, and the Harm Reduction Hub. I don't see any questions coming through the chat. So we'll just keep the webinar up for just another minute so people can grab the link as they need. There were lots of links provided throughout the session today. Any final comments from any of our group here, our panel, I should say? Well, you all have been wonderful and Happy New Year. And thank you again for joining us at the Kentucky Harm Reduction and Recovery Community of Practice webinar series. Until next week, I think February 3rd, I think Casey figured it out, the date.